How a farm boy's impossible trick destroyed 40 Japanese planes, all alone. Ellipsis. 40 enemy planes. One man in the sky. No help coming. Every rule said he should be dead. Every mistake meant fire, water, and silence. But over the Pacific, while others ran, one farm boy flew straight into the kill zone, and changed the war from point-blank range. And that farm boy didn't come from a military academy. He came from a place where mistakes already had consequences. Long before enemy fighters filled the sky, Richard Bong's world was quiet, cold, and demanding. He grew up on a dairy farm in Wisconsin where days began before sunrise and excuses had no value. Animals needed care no matter the weather. Machines failed at the worst times. If something broke, there was no one else to fix it. You learned fast, all the work buried you. That environment didn't create drama, but it built something far more dangerous: discipline under pressure. Bong was not reckless as a boy. He was observant. While others rushed through chores, he paid attention to how things worked. He noticed vibrations in engines, small sounds that warned of failure, tiny imbalances that could turn useful machines into hazards. Those details mattered on a farm, and he absorbed them without realizing how rare that skill was. Control came from understanding, not force. The sky pulled at him constantly. Aircraft passing overhead didn't just inspire dreams, they triggered questions. How fast? How high? Why did they turn the way they did? He built model airplanes, studied shapes, memorized silhouettes. This wasn't imagination, it was preparation. While other young men saw planes as symbols of adventure, Bong saw systems that could be mastered. When he entered flight training, instructors noticed something unsettling. Bong didn't fight the aircraft. He anticipated it. He corrected mistakes before they became problems. He treated planes the way he once treated farm equipment, with respect and restraint. That calm worried some instructors. Combat pilots were supposed to be aggressive. Bong was precise. War didn't change him, it revealed him. Dropped into the Pacific Theater, Bong faced distances so vast they swallowed confidence. Fuel shortages, navigation errors, sudden ambushes, these broke pilots who had looked strong in training. Bong responded the only way he knew how: slow the moment down, focus on the task, ignore everything that didn't matter. Panic never entered the cockpit. Pressure felt familiar. Other pilots noticed it immediately. In the air, Bong was quiet, almost invisible, until he wasn't. He didn't posture or chase glory. He positioned himself carefully, patiently, as if every engagement was another mechanical problem waiting to be solved. The farm had taught him something combat schools couldn't: fear doesn't disappear when you rush. It disappears when you're prepared. The distance between a Wisconsin farm and a Pacific dogfight was enormous, but the skills that carried him there were built long before the war ever called his name. Every steady movement in the cockpit traced back to mornings when quitting wasn't an option and mistakes had consequences. The Pacific Air War was nothing like the battles fought over Europe. There were no cities below, no rail lines or rivers to guide pilots home, only endless water stretching in every direction. Once airborne, a man was completely alone with his aircraft, his fuel gauge, and his decisions. If an engine failed or a navigation error was made, there was no rescue waiting. The ocean didn't forgive mistakes. It erased them. Heat and humidity attacked aircraft as aggressively as the enemy. Engines overheated, guns jammed, instruments failed without warning. Tropical storms appeared suddenly, swallowing formations and scattering pilots across hundreds of miles. Many never saw an enemy plane. They simply vanished, lost to weather, mechanical failure, or fuel starvation. In the Pacific, survival often depended more on endurance than combat skill. When combat did come, it came fast and without mercy. Japanese pilots were not amateurs. Many were veterans, trained rigorously and hardened by earlier campaigns. They flew aircraft designed for agility and close combat, and they knew how to exploit every weakness. Encounters began and ended in seconds. A moment of hesitation was enough to be surrounded, outmaneuvered, and destroyed. There was no such thing as a fair fight. Pilots often found themselves outnumbered, low on fuel, or separated from their units. Radios failed. Visibility vanished in cloud and glare. Communication broke down, leaving each man to rely on instinct and memory. Dogfights unfolded at terrifying speed, with aircraft crossing paths so closely that collisions were a constant threat. Fear was ever present, but it couldn't be acknowledged. Pilots learned to bury it, because fear slowed reactions and distorted judgment. Every mission demanded absolute focus. There was no room for distraction when one wrong move meant fire, water, and silence. The sky was vast, but the margin for survival was razor thin. In this environment, reputation mattered. Pilots quickly learned which enemy silhouettes meant danger and which maneuvers signaled experience. Trust was built not through words, but through who returned from missions. The Pacific became a proving ground where skill, adaptability, and mental endurance mattered more than numbers. It was a theater that punished arrogance and rewarded those who learned quickly, or didn't live long enough to learn at all. Every American pilot flying in the Pacific heard the same warning before combat ever began. Do not dogfight the Japanese Zero. Do not turn with it. Do not get close. The Zero was lighter, faster to maneuver, and unforgiving to anyone who challenged it on its own terms. The sky was already filled with the wreckage of pilots who believed they could outfly it. Doctrine wasn't theory here, it was written in blood. Richard Bong understood the warning. He just didn't accept but it paid a price for that agility. It carried almost no armor. All tanks were exposed. A few well-placed rounds were enough to tear it apart. The problem wasn't power, it was accuracy. And accuracy disappeared at long range, especially in violent, twisting fights. Bong came to a dangerous realization: distance was protecting the enemy. So he did the unthinkable. Instead of firing early and breaking away, Bong closed in. He compressed the fight until there was no room left to maneuver. This went against instinct, against training, against survival logic. At that distance, reaction time vanished. A single error meant collision or explosion. There was no margin for fear. Other pilots watching him thought he was reckless. Some believed he wouldn't survive more than a few missions. But Bong wasn't guessing. He waited longer than anyone thought reasonable, holding fire until the enemy aircraft filled his gun sight. He wanted certainty. At that range, his shots didn't scatter. They hit engines, cockpits, fuel lines. The Zero's agility meant nothing when it had nowhere to Pacific. Being alone in the sky was not a rare moment, it was a constant threat. Formations broke apart easily over vast distances, and when they did, pilots had seconds to adapt or be overwhelmed. Clouds, radio failures, and sudden attacks turned organized missions into chaos. One moment there were friendly aircraft on both sides, and the next there was only open sky and enemy fighters closing in. Richard Bong found himself in these situations again and again. Outnumbered, isolated, and far from help, he learned quickly that hesitation was more dangerous than aggression. There was no time to wait for orders or look for support that might never arrive. Every decision had to be immediate, final, and correct. The P-38 Lightning was his lifeline. Its twin engines gave him speed and range that other fighters lacked, but they also made him a larger target. Japanese pilots recognized it instantly and often focused their attacks on it. Bong used that attention against them. Instead of turning defensively, he used vertical movement, diving hard to gain speed, then climbing steeply to force enemies to overshoot. Each maneuver was designed to break their coordination. Fighting alone required ruthless efficiency. Bong never sprayed bullets or chased multiple targets. He selected one enemy, struck decisively, and disengaged before others could react. He treated combat like a sequence of problems, solving one before moving to the next. Situational awareness mattered more than bravery. He constantly scanned the sky, tracking movement, anticipating attacks before they fully formed. The mental strain was relentless. Being outnumbered meant knowing that every enemy pilot was searching for a mistake. Fatigue set in quickly. Adrenaline faded, but Bong's focus never wavered. He stayed calm, breathing evenly, controlling the aircraft with smooth, deliberate movements. Panic caused pilots to overcorrect. Bong trusted precision. There were moments when escape seemed impossible, fuel running low, damage to the aircraft, enemies closing from multiple directions. In those moments, Bong relied on instinct shaped by experience. He used speed not to flee blindly, but to reposition, forcing enemies into disadvantage. Many fights ended with Japanese aircraft disengaging, unable to trap him. Survival alone didn't define these encounters. Bong didn't just escape, he dominated. Fighting alone sharpened his decision-making and stripped combat down to its essentials. In skies where help rarely arrived on time, he became his own support, his own protection, and his own advantage, proving that isolation didn't have to mean defeat. As Richard Bong's victories accumulated, the numbers began to carry a weight far beyond the cockpit. Each confirmed kill was recorded carefully, checked and rechecked by witnesses and gun camera footage. There was no room for exaggeration in the Pacific. If anything, many engagements went uncounted. When Bong's tally climbed past 30, then 35, it stopped being just a statistic. It became a signal that something extraordinary was happening in the skies. 40 enemy aircraft destroyed was not the result of luck or opportunity. It meant surviving 40 separate moments where death had been close enough to touch. Each victory carried its own memory: violent turns, sudden flashes, aircraft breaking apart mid-air. Bong did not celebrate these moments. He didn't hunt for records. He treated every mission the same way, focused on returning alive. But war doesn't ignore numbers, and neither did those watching from below. For American pilots arriving fresh to the Pacific, Bong's reputation traveled ahead of him. His name appeared in briefings, whispered in tents, repeated with disbelief. Knowing that someone had figured out how to win changed how men approached combat. Fear didn't disappear, but it became manageable. If one pilot could dominate the enemy, then survival felt possible. In a theater defined by loss, Bong's success became a form of armor for morale. The enemy noticed as well. Intelligence reports suggested Japanese pilots were beginning to recognize certain patterns: aggressive closing attacks, decisive strikes, no hesitation. Bong's aircraft didn't need distinctive markings. His behavior identified him. Encounters involving his P-38 often ended quickly, and that reputation spread through the air war faster than official reports ever could. Commanders began to worry. Losing Bong would not just mean losing an ace. It would mean losing confidence across entire units. After his 40th confirmed kill, the decision was made to pull him from combat. Bong resisted. He wanted to return to his squadron, to continue flying alongside the men he trusted. But the orders stood. He was now more valuable alive than in the air. Back home, the story was simplified. Newspapers painted him as a symbol, a farm boy turned national hero, America's top ace. Photographs replaced flight gear with pressed uniforms and forced smiles. The reality was more complicated. Bong carried the weight of knowing others were still fighting while he stood safely away from the front. 40 victories had brought honor, but they had also ended the part of the war where he felt most useful. When the war finally ended, Richard Bong should have been free of danger. The skies were no longer filled with enemy fighters, and the man who survived countless lethal encounters had earned the right to step away. But the world was changing faster than the war had ended. Propellers were becoming obsolete, and a new era of flight was being forced into existence at terrifying speed. The aircraft Bong was assigned to test were not proven machines. They were experiments, fast, unstable, and unforgiving. Jet engines responded differently than anything pilots had known. Controls felt heavier, speeds erased reaction time. Test pilots weren't fighting an enemy they could see, they were fighting uncertainty. Every flight exposed flaws that no blueprint could predict. Bong accepted the role without hesitation. He trusted aircraft the way others trusted routine. Risk had never scared him, unpredictability had. On August 6, 1945, he climbed into the cockpit of a P-80 Shooting Star, America's first operational jet fighter. There were no cameras, no applause, no sense of finality. It was just another takeoff, another unknown. Something failed almost immediately after liftoff. Witnesses on the ground saw the jet lose stability, roll violently, and plunge back toward the Earth. There was no altitude to recover, no time to react. The impact and explosion ended the life of the man who had survived dozens of aerial battles. He was 24 years old. The timing was cruel. That same day, the world's attention was fixed on Hiroshima and the end of the war. Bong's death barely registered beyond those who understood what had been lost. The nation celebrated peace while one of its greatest pilots was gone, claimed not by combat but by progress. His death revealed an uncomfortable truth. Courage didn't stop when the fighting ended. The same men who won wars were now being asked to build the future, and that future demanded the same sacrifices. Bong had spent his life pushing limits, trusting skill over fear. In the end, the limits pushed back. What remains is not just a record or a medal count. It is a reminder that victory often carries a cost long after the battlefield, even when the world believed the danger was over. This is how legends really end, not with applause, but in silence. Stories like this don't live in textbooks, and they don't survive unless someone tells them. If you want the untold truth behind history's heroes, subscribe. Because the next story might be even more shocking than this one, and just as forgotten. If this story made you pause, there are many more history never taught you. Subscribe, and don't let these heroes disappear into silence.